Hello, this is the assignment for evaluating the first introduction and first 20 pages of Emily Bernard's Black is the Body. Um, Emily Bernard starts off the introduction by talking about how she decided to write the book while in the hospital recovering from a surgery from an accident. She talks about the necessity to express her thoughts and feelings, to communicate things because of this near life experience. She also goes into talking about what it means to express oneself and the importance of framing it. And she frames herself and her identity as being heavily influenced by being black, and she calls that a condition that she has always existed in. And she then proceeds to tell the story in good detail about how she got stabbed. She talks about how she was in a coffee shop late one night, just there to pick up a cup of coffee to get back to studying, when somebody came in and was disgruntled and clearly in a poor state of mind, and through no personal reason started stabbing people, and that Emily Bernard was one of those people stabbed. She recounts the story and talks about how she really didn't have a great grasp on the reasoning behind things, on the exact turn of events, and on like just how it really happened and played out, because it was very adrenaline filled and it was something that she was just in the moment experiencing. And so that makes it really hard to have a clean relationship with. So she talks about her relationship with that story and how she defines that part of her life to herself. She talks about how she has to gather a lot of information from other sources to have a good understanding of that story, of how these things that ultimately sort of define her life now, she has to piece together from what other people are telling her, and how she needs to kind of piece it together in a way that makes sense to her, and the importance that it makes sense to her. She also talks about just her reactions and how this affects her relationships in her life, and how it affects everything that she does, from her physical body, how it's affected in a daily way. She sees the scars that she has on her body, but she also has to physically go into a hospital um, post incident and receive help for it, and how that affects her physical relationship with her children, and how it affects her relationship with other people. How this part of her life sort of defines interactions because she has to tell this story. And if she doesn't have a clear understanding of this story, then it's going to be hard to tell to other people. And she talks about how in the bar, sometimes telling that story can have negative impacts on other people. Um, and then she concludes the first 20 pages with talking about how the perpetrator of the crime had been arrested and had stated that he was not in a right state of mind during the events. And had he been in a right state of mind, the events would have never happened in the first place. So I think that she introduces her story in the context of being black, because I think that she's gonna go on to talk about how events that transpire are difficult to understand as you're going through them. I think she's also going to talk about how it is important for someone to have a good relationship with a story of what happened to them, even if they're a victim or if they're a actor in the story. They need to know if they're a victim, or they need to know if they're an actor, or they even just need to know the details of the story. And then she also talks about the scar tissue and how that leaves lasting effects, and how it always will play a part in her life and who she is. And I think that those line of thought is probably gonna be a relation to her experience as a black person, and possibly kind of a metaphor for the black community in America at a larger scale. Because I think that you could make the connection that black people were subjugated to an experience, a complicated, terrible experience, but they lived through it and they survived and they came out on the other side. And somehow they have to come up with a rationalization for this experience, and how important that narrative is to them personally, but also in their communities. And then also outside of their communities with other communities, like with the oppressive of the oppressive side of slavery. You would need to understand, how could somebody rationalize that? How could somebody live in a world where slavery exists and tell themselves that this is a normal world? So it's not only them forming forming a relationship with their lives and their experiences, but also trying to reach out and connect and form a cohesive story that makes sense. And I think she is also going to be talking about the scar tissue or the lingering effects of just events that have happened, how you cannot just return to some perfect body where there's no scars or there's no side effects from having scars inside of your intestines and having the physical pain or the mental reminders or the just aesthetic reminders as well. And I think that that could also be a metaphor for how this thing that happened in our society is prevalent every everywhere you look and in many ways. And I think that that's what I think she might be going with, and that's kind of what I'm thinking with how she laid out the first 20 pages. Honestly, I'm just really excited to see where she goes with this story, because it's just such a well written story, and she really communicates her feelings and her relationship to events. It almost makes it so that exploring the events is part of the excitement, because she is having to connect these things as she goes. And so far, it's a really effective narrative. I think a lot of us can relate to trying to see things in a more holistic way, where you're taking in information from other people and other perspectives, and sometimes that's all you have to write on for making sense of something. And I really like that she is kind of showing us the process of how she's working through creating a story that fits with her life.